What's going on? My name is Dan. I'm a doctor of physical therapy, and with all my videos, it's my goal to explain your body in a way that makes sense to you. So if you're into that kind of thing and you think that I do a good job, please consider liking and subscribing because it makes this a whole lot easier. In today's video, I'm going to mostly just be showing the 5 exercises that I use most often for the rotator cuff, but if you're looking for a deeper dive on the rotator cuff, I did that in a previous video, which you can see right here. But enough intro, let's get into it. If you don't feel like watching the previous video, I am going to start with a little bit of a refresher on the rotator cuff, but if you want to skip straight to the exercises, you can skip to this timestamp right here. For the most part, any issue or any injury among the rotator cuff will be in one of the 3 muscles that lies on the back side of the shoulder blade. Either the supraspinatus, the infraspinatus, or the teres minor are the most likely culprits. When those 3 muscles all fire and work together, they create a motion in the shoulder that we call external rotation. There is a 4th rotator cuff muscle that lies on the inside of your shoulder blade, and that muscle is called your subscapularis, and it makes a motion called internal rotation, but for the most part, any injury in that muscle is a little bit more rare. And even though, while in isolation, the rotator cuff muscles make internal and external rotation in the shoulder, when they're all firing and working together, they work as what we call a shunt muscle, meaning that all 4 muscles work together to hold the shoulder steady when making movements of the shoulder, such as raising your arm up overhead, to the side, or even behind your back. And because the main function of the rotator cuff is to work as a stability shunt muscle, that will be the overall goal that we get to with these 5 exercises. But before we can work into exercises that use the rotator cuff how it's meant to be used, we have to make sure that the rotator cuff can handle their isolated movements first. To do this, I'll normally start with what we call isometric contractions of the shoulder in both internal and external rotation, just to make sure that it can supply some level of contraction and some level of strength. The goal is to be able to push into rotation, feeling muscle contraction and hopefully feeling little to no discomfort. If you're able to supply good contraction isometrically and in isolation, then you're ready to step up to the next level, which is just doing that same exercise but through a full range of motion and against resistance. With these movements, we're looking for kind of the same presentation where you should be able to go through that range of motion with good contraction and minimal discomfort. And if you pass those 2 tests, then it's time to get into my 5 favorite exercises. Number 1, external rotation shoulder raises. In my bio, you can find 2 links to resistance bands on Amazon. One are loops like these, and the other will be longer that you'll see later. The goal of this exercise is to keep your hands within the loop, providing pressure with the outside of your hands to keep the band taut. You then want to slowly raise your hands up the wall without raising your shoulders. You want to keep the consistent pressure with the back of your hands without letting your shoulders rise up towards your ears or letting your elbows flare out to the side. If one of those 2 things starts to happen, that means you're officially compensating and it's time to take a break. Number 2, wall clocks. This exercise uses the same loop band and you can continue to do it against the wall. You also want to avoid making the 2 same mistakes by letting your shoulder rise up towards your ears or letting your elbows flare out to the side. The goal is to take your hand and tap up and away, straight away, and down and away. And those 3 movements count as 1 repetition. Try to keep the movement of your hand slow and controlled, and really try to feel it in the backs of your shoulders rather than anywhere else. You also want to make sure that you're getting the movement from the shoulder and not the elbow. Number 3, external rotation resisted flexion. This is where the longer band comes into play and you need to anchor it to something sturdy. In my case, I just tied a knot in the band so that I could put it above the hinge in the door, but there's plenty of ways to do it. To start this exercise, you want to have your shoulder about 90 degrees out to the side of you with your arm in full external rotation. You then want to maintain that level of external rotation while raising your arm up and down. As the other exercises, don't let your shoulder come up to your ears and don't let that elbow flare. 4, PNF D2 Flexion. This exercise, the non-working hand will hold the band steady at your waist as an anchor while the other arm does the work. With the working arm, you want to keep the elbow straight, starting over and across to the opposite hip. From there, you want to pull your arm, keeping the elbow straight over and across your body at an upwards angle. And I know I sound like a broken record, but at this point you should know that you should be feeling this in the back of your shoulder, and at no point should you allow your shoulder to raise up towards your ears. Number 5, face pulls. With this exercise, we have to anchor it to something sturdy again, but this time at a higher level. In my case, I'm just taking that knot and anchoring it to the top of the door. The goal of this exercise is to get the shoulder blade a little bit more involved, and you want to pull so that you're almost grabbing onto a pencil with your shoulder blades. Along with that shoulder blade action, you want to keep your thumbs at about the level of your eyes, which will force the arms into external rotation and thus working the rotator cuffs. Do not let your shoulders climb up towards your ears. The goal is to build up all these exercises to 3 sets of 10 and use a resistance that by the end of that 10th rep it feels challenging, but it doesn't compromise your form at all. For most of my rotator cuff patients, I have them do this either once a day or once every other day, or if they're higher level, use this as something like a warm-up before an upper body day at the gym. Please take a second and like and subscribe, and if you have any suggestions of other exercises you'd like to see, please drop them in the comments.